Okay. Um, and if you have any questions at any point during this presentation, feel free to drop them in the chat. That's at the bottom of the screen, and we will have Umo answer them whether during or at the end of the workshop based on what you prefer, Umo. Totally up to you to set that. And also want to name that there are captions at the bottom of the screen. So if you need those today, feel free to click on that button. So before we get started, I also want to introduce SAS. So what is Student Affiliates of 17? It is a national membership organization for students associated with the Society of Counseling Psychology, which is Division 17 of the American Psychological Association. SAS is a vehicle for enhancing communication between quote unquote counseling psychology leaders and counseling psychologists in training. SAS members increase their identification with the profession by experiencing this formal involvement with the discipline's professional organization. And Division 17 and APA benefit from the commitment and active participation of students who bring new ideas, energy, and enthusiasm to the profession. We are deeply committed to hearing the voices of students, especially those who are intentionally silenced and marginalized, and have them be heard by those who usually make decisions within this field. And today's workshop came to be because of the hard work and dedication of the co-chairs of a committee within SAS called the Masters Clinicians Committee, which comprises myself and my co-chair, Lindsay Palos. Um, thank you, Momo. I see you. And just so that people can stay connected with SAS, whether on social media, or on other platforms, I'm just gonna drop a link in the chat that you can access. And now coming to the workshop itself, just sharing like a sneak peek into the vision for this event. So I graduated last year from a mental health counseling program and I'm an early clinician, or an early master's level clinician. And a lot of the things that I've been wrestling with since I've graduated and started working has been this question about power dynamics, whether it's between the client and the counselor or between the counselor and the supervisor, and how there are systems of power and domination that really do repeat themselves in all of these relationships. There have also been a lot of questions in my mind about mandated reporting. Do I want to use that? What's the fear of professional liability in this capacity for myself as well as for the person supervising me? And also a lot of questions about how do we dismantle this system that is rooted in oppression. Um, and finally, questions about non-carceral suicide prevention, because I've had supervisors really use policing as a way to support people, but doesn't really work in my experience, and in the experience of a lot of people. So anyway, I'm now just going to pass this on to Omos to introduce themselves, to get started, and make this vision a reality for us today.
Wow, spectacular. Hi, everyone. My name is Umu. My full name is Nde Umu Silla. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist right now, today, technically, for the next 2 years now, at least. So that's exciting and stressful, but exciting. Okay, I'll talk a little bit more about why in a little bit. But yeah, I'm really excited to be here with you today to answer any questions that you have. Even if you have a question that doesn't feel like connected to navigating power and control, and you're just like, yo, Umu, what do you do with your day and your time? Feel free to drop it into the chat. Even if I don't answer it like live, I'll send a little recap email and I'll make sure to answer it via written ways. Okay. So before I jump in, I've been doing these grief and genocide acknowledgements for 1+ years, especially because I know that a lot of people's like workplaces, internship sites, whatever place it might be, maybe even families and communities, don't have a lot of like places and spaces where grief and genocide are being acknowledged. And so I like to just spend time at the start of this workshop just naming that the grief that you feel is reasonable. That if you feel like you're going mad, going crazy, like watching all of this unfold, thinking like, how are we living in this day and age and time? And like this is how things are going, it's really reasonable. And so invitation for you to engage in whatever direct and indirect kinds of actions that you want and can engage in, and to remember that all of our liberation is tied up together, even if a lot of people and maybe systems that be are pretending and doing lots of like dissonancing. It's not a real word, I don't think, but y'all are peeping what I'm talking about. And so I just want to spend time naming that before we continue and allow, yeah, just like space and time and breath, and maybe even tears if anything's coming up for you while I'm talking about this. Yeah, for the first like I don't know 5 months of me doing this, when the Palestinian genocide started happening, I was like crying through this every single time I did it. It was so, yeah. So now, not that I feel disconnected, I feel a little bit more like grounded and rooted in my contributions and what I'm doing, and so I'm not sobbing through it. But like, is it still painful? Does it still make me go, "What the fuck is going on?" Yeah, like every day, every night. And now a land and labor acknowledgement. If you'd like to know the land that you occupy, if you don't already know, feel free to go to native-land.ca or whose land, www.whose.land. We acknowledge as traditional custodians of the land we're each joining from and pay deep respect to elders past, present, and emerging, along with any elders joining us today. We recognize that we live and work on stolen indigenous land and that this land has been cared for over thousands of years. We also honor the brilliance, labor, and life extracted from people of African descent through centuries of enslavement and exploitation. We celebrate the resilience of indigenous peoples and African diaspora communities here and around the world. We carry our ancestors in us and we are called to lead with responsibility, reflection, and with care. I am the only facilitator for the day. My name is Umusilla. I'm a licensed therapist, marriage and family therapist specifically. I was born in Senegal. I'm 30 years old, Virgo sun, Virgo moon, Scorpio stellium, if you care about that stuff. If you don't, go la la la. I'm a generator if you're into human design. If you're not, ignore me. I'm a die-hard Scooby-Doo and Shrek fan, and I mean die hard, die hard. I will accidentally go on a tangent about all things Scooby-Doo and Shrek, so I won't talk about it right now. But if you want to talk about it separately, hit me up. I am queer, a gender bender, and a lover of laughter, play, and pleasure. Current visual description: I'm a dark-skinned Black person with like reddish hair. I was inspired by Kiki Palmer because the red of her hair was just so gorgeous. I thought I have to do the same. And so here I am, also a Virgo with reddish hair. I have on black oval glasses, or ovalish glasses for seeing. I'm wearing a long sleeve black top, and behind me you can see a goldish colored wall with a bunch of frames with flowers inside of them of different kinds. I love feedback on how to make materials more accessible, closed captionings available, like it was mentioned. If you need me to adjust my speed or volume because I get too excitable, feel free to like drop snail or turtle emojis or just be like, Umu, slow down, and then I'll slow down. I love interruptions and reflections and feedback via chat. And so feel free to drop everything in the chat as soon as it comes to you. It doesn't have to sound like a thesis or like we're in some college course or something. If it's a sentence fragment, drop it. I want to see it. If you have a meme that feels like it's connected, drop the meme. I want to see it. Access needs. Access needs are something a person needs to communicate, learn, and take part in an activity. They can change from moment to moment and are sometimes connected to your sensory needs. And so center your access needs throughout this. If you turn off your camera the whole time, I love it. If you hop on and hop off and hop on and hop off, I love it. It's not distracting me personally. And so like do what you want to do. If you have multiple beverages like I do, feel free to have both of them. I love to see other bisexual beverage goblins out there in the world. Welcome. This is a glimpse into my lineage of knowledge. I haven't read or studied directly with all of these people or theories or entities, but like they inform a lot of how I do my work, right? And so I like to create these lineages of knowledge so people know where I'm coming from, and I invite you to do the same, right? Especially with how colonial academia can be with how it's like teaching us and who we're learning from. If you're out there learning from like someone on Instagram, learning from this facilitator, learning from some workshop, like definitely name who you learn from so others can do the same. This is a little note on intellectual property that I'm not going to read. I just ask that you don't steal, appropriate, or plagiarize this. If you have a therapist, bestie, or homie that you love, send it to them. If you have a therapist enemy that you don't love, send it to them too. Like, send the slides. I love that. I don't care about that at all. I just ask that you don't do anything strange that would have my ancestors go, "Who's this clown? What's going on here?" I don't want my ancestors to think anything weird of you, you know? And now I already asked folks in the chat if they want to share their name, their pronouns, one silly or playful thing you've done recently, access needs, and one thing you'd like to learn today or a question you have. Feel free to put that in the chat. I'll probably like stay on this slide for like a minute because I'm an overambitious Virgo, and so I have a lot of things I want to get through because all of it is really important. And there's only an hour and a half, so put it in the chat. I will read it eventually, this little intro, but I'm only going to stay here for a minute, even though I normally stay on this slide for a while. Okay. Yay. Um, we have someone in the chat who said one part of her lineage of knowledge are critical feminist thinkers like Bell Hooks and Audre Lorde, who have informed how she sees the world. One thing she'd like to learn today is how to de-escalate clients in crisis without resorting to carceral methods. I love it. I love it. I'll share one silly thing that I did today. I am a big fan of like finding shoes that are ridiculous to wear. Like I had these shoes, these like house shoes. They were a shark, and their name was like Bertram the shark. And so it was like a shark, a business shark, and I would wear them during business meetings. So I had that shoe that I really love. But my shoe that I love, love, love a lot now, for what you will see are obvious reasons, my Shrek Crocs. Today I walked to the coffee shop in my Shrek Crocs. I was stomping through the sidewalks, just feeling like that girl, feeling like that ogre. And so that is one silly thing that I did today. One playful thing that I did today too. Wore those Shrek Crocs. We have another person who said they, she napped well, cuddling with a golden poodle. Lineage of knowledge comprises me. Thank you. Project Let's, Wildflower Alliance, yes. Alice Wong, yes, among many others. Beautiful. Another person, a Cancer. Hi, sweet Cancer human. So sweet, so precious. Non-binary queer. A silly thing that happened lately was I was at the store and a little mouse ran past your foot. I hope to learn more about navigating power dynamics between supervisor and clinician. Cute. And then this is the last one I'll read out loud. A playful thing I've done recently is purchase a mini house for some of the figurines to display because they make me happy and deserve a home. Hi, Aquarius. A lot of Aquariuses love me, and I love a lot of Aquariuses back. I'm not gonna lie, like we're a great match. Welcome. Other Virgos, hello. I love you. We're misunderstood. We also do need boundaries. It's a little bit of both. I love it. Okay. I'm lying. I'm gonna read one more. Um, Next person. I've spent a lot of time at Ooh, that's so fucking cool. Aerial circus classes recently to try to be an to try to be embodied during all this grief and trauma in terms of lineage of knowledge, lots of anti-carceral theorists and formerly incarcerated individuals, as well as trans folks disrupting the academia. Yes, like Hill Malatino, Matilda Bernstein, Sycamore, Paul Preciado, potentially Eric Stanley, etc. Would love to talk about negotiating supervisor dynamics, caring for yourself in hostile environments. Amazing, amazing. Hello, Taurus Sun. Hello, hello. Now, community agreements. I won't read through all of them, but I want to invite you to know that this is a space where shared expertise and wisdom is present, is centered. And so if you have wisdom, if you are like, I learned this tip or trick from this person, feel free to share it. I'm not the only person that like knows stuff. Collective liberation, overcoming oppression aids all of our liberation, and listen like accomplices slash co-conspirators. We respect a wide variety of choices and perspectives, even when we disagree. Today's focus is going to be an intro on radical mental health, and we'll explore strategies for navigating power and control in therapeutic and supervision spaces. Invitation to take a few moments to notice and scan your body mind, offer any gentle touch, movement, breath, or healing energy to any, all, or no parts of your body, or no parts of your body. Mm. Okay. Radical mental health is about community, it's about inter and multi-connectedness, it's about grassroots, centers people of the global majority, it's about options, liberation, language, culture, and emotional slash embodied experiencing. Key parts of radical mental health include an anti-oppressive framework, a valuing of all knowledge and identities and body minds, a centering of autonomy, consent, and self-determination, a challenging of authority and expertise, a knowing in the power of mutual aid and harm reduction, as well as access and equity. And lastly, but maybe most importantly, radical mental health moves beyond the binary distinction between sickness and wellness. And so, if we're talking about radical mental health, it's important to know that it's not just sick people and well people. There's a lot of people that live in that in between space that experience sickness in these ways, but wellness in other ways. And if we only focus on those sick people that look that specific way, which is usually coded in ableism and anti-blackness, then a lot of people who are in pain, who are sick, who don't feel well, get ignored and don't get to experience care. And that stinks. Goals of radical mental health first aid. I won't read through all of them, but I will highlight that one of the main things that I invite clinicians to really focus on in their time as clinicians is to be a link to referrals, resources, and community, right? It doesn't really matter like how much you're doing in the therapeutic room in those 45 minutes if that person has nothing to go out to in the world after the 45 minutes, right? And so start some research. I'm going to give you some information in a little bit, but I just want to offer that information to you. And lastly, I think that radical mental health first aid is really special because it normalizes the emotional caregiving of ourselves and each other in public and private spaces. So I'm a therapist who really believes that therapists need to be decentered in people's care networks, right? Like I think therapy is really cool and people's therapists can be really impactful. But again, if the person doesn't have anyone else in their life and the therapist is not imparting those skills, then it really puts the therapist and the therapy seeker in a strange situation, to say the least. And I'm not sure how ethical that might be. Here are some questions. How were you taught to think about crisis, suicide, or power in your role as a therapist? And what have you come to understand about your relationship to power as a therapist? Maybe you're like, Umu, I don't know anything, actually. They didn't teach me anything. I'm actually so confused about it, and that's it. That's what I've got. Maybe what you know is that you have power and that you want to make sure that you don't like take power from people, and that's what you've got. I love it. Let me know where you're at. And again, it can be a sentence fragment, no pressure.
I feel like I've been taught to be scared of this, of crisis situations and like risk. And it's like when any sort of risk is mentioned in the therapy room, you kind of have to remove your therapist hat and be like, okay, now we need to make sure that you're alive and so that we don't get in trouble. And it's like hard to navigate that with like my own personal sense of like morality.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Been there, felt that. And it can be really like, how do I say, like confusing to all the parts of you that might be present, like the part that learned all of this like suicide risk assessment stuff, and then the part of you that like is rooted in community, is rooted in like consent, is rooted in all this other stuff that they don't teach us in grad school. And so there's this like internal fight that sometimes happens, or at least happened for me for a lot of my therapeutic career. We've got very assessment based and clinically focused rather than contextual, yep, in terms of crisis and suicide. Maybe taught that we have too much power can refer us to be hospitalized rather than reducing harm, or again, understanding the context of pain. Yes, a million times. Sometimes, like, I'd be shocked. Like, somebody mentioned suicide, and my supervisor when I was in grad school would be like, make sure you pull out a safety plan and you t do safety plan as soon as someone says suicide. And then I would do that, and then the person's looking at me like I'm a strange person, reasonably so, because it's like I'm just talking casually about something that like has been a part of my life for a long time. Like I'm not actively harming, this is not a crisis for me in the way that it's a crisis for you and your license and your supervisor. So I actually now don't trust you because now I'm scared because of how you've responded to me even mentioning the word suicide. I've experienced folks talking out of both sides of their mouth, yes, encouraging least invasive and most consensual path to intervention slash safety for someone at imminent risk of SA, but also collaborating with carceral systems. Yep. Yes, yes, yes. Anything else coming up for people before I move forward? Again, I want to name that normally in a workshop of this topic, I would give a lot more time and spaciousness for people with different brain styles and like ways of processing to think and offer a response to these things. But with the nature of the workshop time and things, we're gonna move through a little quickly. But I still, if you're processing and you end up having an answer in 5 minutes, I personally think it's helpful to write it down in my humblest of opinions, put it into the chat. Cute. And if that's you, if you're still spending time thinking about it, if you want to screenshot this slide, feel free to. You'll also get the slides in an email afterwards, but I just want to offer you the chance to grab the question before I move forward. Okay. Crisis 101. So I love Project Let's invitation to look into their work if you haven't already. Incredible, incredible. This is a quote from one of their guidebook thingy-mabobs out there in the world. It says crisis situations often stem from multiple unaddressed issues with a person's ability to exist comfortably in their environment. Whether you're in crisis, approaching crisis, or supporting someone in crisis, slow down, take a moment to sense what's happening in your body, and remember that you don't need to navigate crisis alone. Right? Sometimes when we're in the crisis moment, it can feel like very isolating, whether you're the one in crisis or you're supporting someone. But if possible, see if you can try and slow down the situation or slow down your experience of it, maybe with deep breaths, maybe with like some feet stomps, maybe with something else, humming, I don't know, so that you can connect to the thing a little differently. Project Let's also talks about how many times our own lack of skills, fears, internalized ableism, and saneism can contribute to situations where we perceive to be a crisis, right? And I also want to say with ableism, one of my favorite definitions of ableism by Talila T.L. Lewis, they talk about how ableism has to like include anti-blackness. Like if there's ableism happening, anti-blackness is an inherent part of it. And so those two cannot be separated. In some of the resources that you get from me post-workshop, you'll get a little bit more information about ableism and all that good stuff, especially this definition, but I just want to offer you a glimpse into that. Here's a radical thing that I'm going to share with you that might like shake up some of what you've learned in grad school. Having a diagnosis or having a mental illness or being a person that experiences madness does not automatically mean you are in crisis or that person is in crisis. And crises don't automatically mean we're talking about suicide. And so it's really important in our work as clinicians to decouple these three things as being one and the same. Sometimes for some people, all of these three are present, right? There's a diagnosis, the person sees or hears things, and there's a crisis, and they're suicidal. But seeing or hearing something doesn't automatically mean there's a crisis present. And jumping to that kind of energy, right? When a person shares that with you, can really contribute to feelings of unsafety for the person that's sharing that with you. And what did I want to share just now? The thought is leaving my mind and it's walking away from me. Oh well, moving on with that then. The next thing I'm going to share around this is that people's experience of suicidality is very different. And so it's really important for us to be curious when people share that they are experiencing suicidality or have suicidal thoughts before jumping to scary colonial and or carceral ways of navigating things like calling 911, immediately psychiatric hospitalizing somebody, pulling out a safety plan that's like really cold and heartless and like going through it really fast. Ultimately, I'm sharing all this because I want you all to know that crisis and emotional distress looks different for all people and all bodies. Do not assume a person is in crisis based solely on your perception. Do not assume a person is in crisis based solely on your perception. And I'll also add based solely on your first like reaction to what they're sharing with you. Because remember, what people share goes through like so many lenses of our experience. Now onto a quick little suicide 101. This was something that kind of like knocked my socks off when I really like really realized it after having a lot of suicidal folks on my caseload. Thinking about suicide is not the same as wanting to die, and wanting to die is not the same as having a plan to die. Those three are all separate experiences. Now, some people may have all of them present inside of themselves, and that might inform the intervention that you choose to use. That might inform like what your internship site or your first, workplace says that you're supposed to do in this kind of emergency. But it's really important for you as the clinician that's going to try and be as responsible as possible and be like grounded and rooted in your response to know that these three things are different. Do folks have any reactions to this? What's coming up for people? I've always felt this in my bones as someone who's had similar feelings, but have always been pathologized for it. Exactly. Part of the reason why I'm sharing this is to decrease some of that pathology that happens. Because guess what? We live in a world where like people aren't getting their needs met systemically, right? They're crying out for help. They're doing everything they're supposed to do, right? Especially for those people that are like situated in the global north and um American dream wise at least. And people's needs are still not getting met. And if your needs are not getting met, and this context is this context, like for a lot of people, wanting to die and having a plan to die is quite reasonable. It's not this strange, like weird, like out of like extraterrestrial experience. You'd be shocked at how many people, potentially even in your world, have wanted to die since they were like in kindergarten, even if they didn't have the language for it. They just knew, they looked around, they saw their context, maybe their family of origin. They were like, this is not good. I don't like this. This is never going to be good. And that's obviously really sad and painful. And it's really important to know that like it's on us, especially if we're in this like clinical place of trying to support a person. It's on us to figure out how to help people like link to resources, link to community, link to mutual aid so that we can like support them in getting their needs met. Because telling them to like work on the CBT triangle and change their thoughts and then their behavior so that they can interact with oppression differently is so ridiculous, to say the least. I didn't mean to, if you like the CBT triangle, I didn't mean to, I'm so sorry if you like that triangle. I don't mean to be a hater. It's a helpful triangle sometimes, for real. It is. But now when we're talking about oppression, you can't CBT anybody out of oppression. I'm so sorry. Um, okay. We've got this was definitely clarifying for me too when I first heard that these things were distinct and represented different experiences. But one thing that I have run into is people planning suicide attempts, sometimes in pretty intense detail, as a way of fantasizing or coping with feelings. Yes, that is absolutely something that people do. It can be hard to untangle whether folks are planning as a coping exercise or whether they have intention to follow through. One of the things that I've done in that situation is just like asking, what is this all about? Talk to me about how this feels. Like, what's your intention around it? What part of you is like using this? And then seeing where the conversation goes. Yes, and coming from this and in a not cold and clinical way absolutely gives people the space to slow down and be present with clients. This is a brave space to be a CBT hater. Well, then CBT. What modalities, interventions do I find helpful for the topic of oppression? I love narrative therapy. Huge fan. Big fan. Love it. Love, yes. What else do I love? I love emotional, is EFT, emotional focus therapy. Hot, hot, hot. So good. I love somatics work, right? Like whether that's um connected to the lineage of like somatic experiencing or connected through the lineage of generative somatics. Love it. Relational cultural, so good, so hot. Internal family systems wets my whistle like no other. For shoresy worsy. Boy, oh boy. Yeah, systems, structural. Oh my God, structural family. You guys almost gave me a jump scare. Structural family. Woo! It is good. It is good. Woo! No, family therapy is a all the theories in that place, in that world. It's a good one though. And so I'm glad that I went over this. Look at all these lovely theories, right, that we can work through and work with. Also note that sometimes if you're not using a specific theory or modality or intervention that like has a name or whatever, it doesn't mean that what you're doing isn't good. Right, some of what I do is like so in instinctual, right? And like gut led and like sometimes like my ancestors will just like drop a thought into my head and I'll just like say it out loud and now we're going to a place. And there's no white man in a book that's ever gonna take credit for that. I did it. It was me. Now on to suicidism. If this is your first time seeing this word, drop a 1 in the chat for me, please. Suicidism. Have you ever seen this ever? If you've never seen this, put a 1 in the chat. Okay, great. Welcome. This is one of the biggest and baddest isms of them all. It's so bad we don't even talk about it, right? It's not even really named when we're talking about all the other isms in the world. It was coined by a queer trans scholar named Alexander Burrill, who talks about how suicidism is basically about the oppression of suicidal people and it structures and naturalizes the violent way suicidal people are treated. Burrill states that suicidism is deeply intertwined with ableism and saneism. Suicidism looks like forced institutionalization, revoking of parental rights, exclusion from insurance coverage, expulsion from schools, termination from jobs, social and relational abandonment, unequal power relation between suicidal and non-suicidal people. Talk about yuck, yuck, yuck. Social factors and systems of oppression absolutely contribute to the risk of suicide and crises. And it's really on us as clinicians to be aware of how suicidism is a big part of our jobs. Like literally, as soon as somebody mentions the word suicide, we're trained to be suicide cops and to like lock them up and make sure that they stay alive at all costs. And that's so nasty. We were gonna have a break, but we're not gonna have one anymore. I'm so sorry. If you want to take a break though, I invite you to take the break now. Um, we're gonna talk about power, and this is recorded, so feel free to take care of yourself. Power 101. Intro to power dynamics. So many things to say about power. Power exists everywhere all the time. And as therapists, ignoring it and pretending like it's not there is not going to make it disappear. In fact, in the absence of a grounded understanding of what power and oppression are and how they function in workplaces, organizations, relationships, it really, really like makes it so that we're navigating through the world in ways that contribute to marginalized folks experiencing harm, re-traumatization, and burnout. For those of you entering the field, especially if you hold any privileged identities or are moving into positions of authority in whatever ways, it's really important to know that you will hold power whether you want to or not. Like right now, you might hold power in ways that you don't like feel comfortable with, but they exist. And those of us who hold power, any kind of power, must be deeply, deeply, deeply invested in our ongoing growth in practicing accountability and in being open to things like feedback and evaluation and conversation and accountability. It's really, really important for us to have, as much as possible, as often as possible, a commitment ongoing every day to power sharing and redistribution. What I'm talking about isn't this like theoretical thing. It's something to pay attention to and interact with today, right now, if you're not already doing so. One thing that I want to like demystify for folks is that power is not inherently bad. So if you think that, please feel free to like free yourself from that thought. It can be bad. It can be real bad. Okay? But it's not inherently bad. It just exists. And it always needs to be held with care, transparency, and a willingness to be changed by others. Because if power exists and we're pretending like it doesn't exist, then we are really like in a strange situation and potentially traumatizing situation for others. Just because you're pre-licensed doesn't mean you don't have power. Just want to name that, right? Are there people that have more power than you in the field? For freaking sure. Like me, for example. I absolutely have more power than a lot of you people in this room right now, in lots of ways. But then there's also people in this room that have power in ways that I don't have access to. And that's also just true, you know? Um, what else do I want to name here? Power in the therapeutic relationship. So I'm just gonna go through a couple of like places and spaces where power and control like pop up in the therapeutic relationship. And then we'll get into like a little bit more of a nitty-gritty 101 on how, like all the different kinds of power that exist. Okay. So first things first, power is absolutely inherent in the therapeutic relationship. How and why, you ask? There's structural power due to training, credentials, access to systems, and perceived expertise, right? Even if the therapist has no expertise, the fact that they are a therapist affords them expertise. That's just true. Like I know a lot of nincompoop therapists out there in the field that have expertise, and I'm just like, wow, wow. And so that happens all the time. And so it's really important to just like be mindful of that. Um, Oftentimes therapy seekers, often called clients, are in vulnerable positions. They are often seeking help. They are navigating crisis, and sometimes they're even mandated to see you. If somebody is mandated to see you, that's a sticky power like situation to really be aware of. Because not only do you have power over them as the therapist, but now the state also has a whole different kind of power over them as well. And you're colluding with the state, even if you don't want to, by virtue of your job. I too was a person that colluded with the state when I was a functional family therapist for a nonprofit. The state was mandated clients to me, and I was working with those people in their homes. Even with the best of intentions, right? The power stuff gets sticky and strange and weird. Still helpful to talk about it whenever possible. Question for you to maybe jot down or just like reflect on post workshop. How am I naming, sharing, or navigating power? Again, the question is, how am I naming, sharing, or navigating power? And maybe you don't have an answer to that right now. Great. We all have to start somewhere. Number two, with therapists, and this is just true and no one can fight me on it, a lot of times power is disguised as care or concern. And you might have even seen this in like your personal relationships or family dynamics. Sometimes what we call clinical judgment, and I mean that in quotes, and I mean that facetiously and sarcastically, or doing what's best is actually about maintaining control. Some therapists are control power hungry monsters, and they just want to feel like they can control the people on their caseload. Why? It's not really my business, but I know it's inappropriate. Sometimes in this situation where power is disguised as care or concern, you might hear phrases like, or you might have said phrases like, I'm just concerned for your safety. But this is actually this like sometimes coded way to justify surveillance, coercion, or unnecessary escalation. In this power disguised as care or concern vibe, this is where you are playing the therapist as cop in a cardigan vibe, where you are acting more like an enforcer instead of a collaborator. Please, please, I beg of you, do not be a therapist cop in a cardigan. Question to ask yourself here. Am I using control to build trust? Or, no, am I using care to build trust or to maintain control? Am I using care to build trust or to maintain control? No, you should not be seeing a different slide than the one that we're on right now. My pleasure. Number 3, control often shows up through policy, documentation, and best practices, right? We're here charting styles like their speech and how they like move their bodies in session. We're doing risk assessments. We have crisis protocols we're following. These can sometimes be tools of disciplines rather than tools of support, especially for the therapy seekers that are multiply marginalized, right? These things can sometimes mirror carceral logic, carceral ways of interacting with people. Then it makes it so that you as the therapist are acting like a um parole officer. And oftentimes therapists are pretending like documentation, diagnosing, and mandated reporting are neutral, and that in and of itself is rooted in this like desire to have this kind of relationship to power and control. Because if there's something that I hope we can agree on in this room today together is that documentation, diagnosis, and mandated reporting are never ever neutral. Never in the history of life are these things neutral. And so a question to think about in this section, how does institutional fear shape my behavior more than the therapy seeker's needs? Institutional fear, therapy seeker's needs. And then a last thing before I move on to a different slide, relational repairs in the therapeutic setting require naming power, not hiding it. And not even just a therapeutic setting, but also the supervision setting. Trust grows when we acknowledge harm and power, not when we pretend that it doesn't exist. Therapy seekers can often feel power even if it's not named. You can feel power in the room with your supervisor, with a professor, even when it's not named. It exists. And so I really invite folks to know that practicing collaborative care includes checking in about how power feels in the room and asking yourself questions like, how might I bring power into the room without wielding it over someone? Great. Now, if you're like Umu, what are the different kinds of power out there in the world? I'm gonna name, how many is this? 7. But if you like type in power into google.com and type in forms of power versus types of power, like you'll find a world of different things. So for positional power, this might come from formal roles or job title, like your supervisor, your clinical director, they have positional power. Your professor, positional power. We have operational power. If you have operational power or someone in your world has operational power, it means they have influence over day-to-day processes, decisions, or system. Like which clients get seen, what policies gets followed, all of those juicy details. So maybe a director at a practice or the nonprofit CEO or something else. Number 3, social power. This is having the ability to shape others' thoughts or behaviors through relationships, reputations, or popularity. I have a lot of social power just by having like on my Instagram, I have a lot of like some people say I have a lot of followers. I'm putting that in quotes because some people have like 10 times the followers that I have, but I have a lot of people that follow me. And so there's a level of social responsibility that I must have with the social power that I have, even if sometimes it feels complicated to be seen in that way. Are there some theoretical orientations that inherently utilize more power in the client-therapist relationship? Do you mean like more power over? Or like what do you mean by this question, if you don't mind saying more? Number four, hierarchical power. You do mean, okay, power over. I'm not sure if there's any that utilize more power over. I know, what was that book? There are some experiential theories that use more power over in terms of how much like um mm, facilitation or um guidance a therapist is having over what happens in the therapy room. So, for example, in some therapy modalities, I can't think of the actual name of some of them right now. I'm just telling you what I remember loosely. Therapists are taught to, in family therapy, therapists are taught to like change the positions of the therapy seekers in the room because that might help to change what happens like dynamic wise and like experientially. So I might pause a session as that kind of therapist and say, "Hey, mom, could you sit next to kid real quick and like maybe even put your hand on her back?" That's me having a lot of power over, right? The client, the therapy seeker knows that they should trust me and that I'm trustworthy, and so they're just gonna like follow my cues, you know? And that's me, that's part of the therapeutic modality. It's to like have that kind of energy, to have that kind of like, I'm the expert and I'm here to like, you came to me for support to decrease symptoms, to do this. And so follow what I say and symptoms will be decreased. How's that landing for folks? Did that kind of answer your question? Oh my gosh. Lots to learn forever. I'm learning every day, going, what the is going on in this therapy world? So I'm glad you asked. And I think like this is a great question to like ask yourself whenever you're interacting with a theory. I wonder if this theory like has a desire to like have more power over in how I bring about interventions. And if so, is that something that I want to talk to people about before I just start directing people in here? Yes? No, I don't know. Your supervisor might tell you not to say anything, that is just how things are done, and you might say something differently. Okay, number four, hierarchical power. This is nested within positional power. So there's like positional power, and then we have hierarchical power. It's kind of a branch off type of vibe. This relates to where someone sits in the organizational chain of command. So again, like there's a private practice owner, maybe there's a clinical director, maybe there's the supervisor, and then maybe there's the first year therapist, and then maybe there's an intern. Right. So we can kind of tell who has a little bit more power based off of where they lie in the hierarchy. In any place that's telling you that they are flat in their hierarchy, it's really important to see if they're just saying that or if it's actually happening in practice. And when I say flat in hierarchy, I mean that there is no like leader. There is no like everyone is in a similar position. So sometimes like there are very few of these, but there are private practices out there that exist that are collectives, that are worker owned. So everyone in the private practice has a stake in the business and they are worker owned. Racial power, systemic advantages or disadvantages based on race or ethnicity. This clearly shapes who's trusted, heard, promoted, penalized. Situational power, temporary or context-specific influence, right? So maybe being the only person in the room with a particular expertise or resource. And then lastly, identity power. This refers to the influence or advantage a person holds based on aspects of their social identity, like race, gender, class, citizenship, sexuality. It shows up in how others perceive, respond to, or defer to us as clinicians, often unconsciously. In therapy, identity power can shape who gets believed, who gets diagnosed, who feels safe, whose experiences are validated, who immediately gets a 911 call and doesn't. All of it is a part of this. And it's important to know with identity power, it's not just about like individual bias, it's about systemic patterns of privilege and marginalization. I think it's hard because some therapy seekers, and this is racialized and gendered, are looking for a more didactic, directive relationship. I don't want to make someone feel differently about my role, especially if it's being culturally informed, but I'm also uncomfortable with that dynamic. I think it can be a both and. Like, I really value and respect that, like, you're looking for this kind of directive, and there are ways that I can show up in that way. And also, there's ways that I don't feel comfortable, and I'm gonna try as often as possible to center consent in how I'm doing things. And then I also talk a lot about personally, like, I don't want to be pedestalized in your life. Like, I'm not this all-knowing great therapist. Like, sometimes I'm actually wrong. Sometimes I'm bullshitting. Sometimes I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. And sometimes I heard something wrong. And so I responded weirdly. And so these things are all true and need to be like accounted for. And holding me to this power, even if it's culturally informed, doesn't help anyone. Right. And so I'm here to help like shift the culture, not like manipulate you into thinking what I think, but like give you a different context and more information to think about. Nice. Okay. This is one of my most favoriteest metaphors, visual metaphors created by Kai Cheng Tom. It is the horse and rider power metaphor. It has a rider and a horse. In this image, the rider has power over the horse. It can command the horse. That's just true. What's also true though is that the horse can throw the rider off of it. The horse has power under. So even though we as therapists have power over in situations, therapy seekers also do have power under in lots of ways. And it's on us to help like uncover those ways together. What's true also is that humans have more systemic power than horses. No one can fight me on that, right? Identity power just exists within this relationship. And so the same might be true in the therapeutic relationship with a therapy seeker. The last two that I'll read, power within. Both of these, the horse and the rider, both have their own internal strengths and resources. And that's part of the yumminess about being a therapist. We can help to support that uncovering process, right? To see like what are your strengths, your resources, your skill sets? What is there a desire to develop? The same is true with you. You too have power within. And lastly, power with. Really fun, really great. Together, the horse and the rider, or you and the therapy seekers, can navigate obstacles and help each other meet needs. Now, I want to make sure that I make clear that in the therapeutic relationship, the therapy seeker is not there to just like fulfill your every whim or like to literally meet your needs, but you are in a relationship, a reciprocal relationship in certain kinds of ways. That is true even if we're not talking about it, right? Like, for example, I, as a therapist with some of the therapy seekers on my caseload, I was in a moment where I was really burnt out, and sometimes I'd get sick before session, because of like some of the nervous system things that were happening, and I'd have to like cancel last minute. And obviously that affects therapy seekers in a way. Um, and this was something that we had conversations about. Like, I want to be in a kind of relationship with you where I know that if this type of thing happens, you know that I will shift how I navigate things like scheduling and allow you onto my calendar in a way that's maybe different than normal because we're in a relationship with each other. What I'm doing affects you, and what you're doing affects me. So it's not just this one-way thing where like the therapy seeker cancels and I take the fee because they canceled late and that's it. But when I cancel, I don't say anything about it. I'm just like, oh well, you're shit out of luck. That's your life. That's not really fair. You know what I mean? And so invitation to really think about how this relates to you and to know that in the therapy room, therapists have power over therapy seekers, but there also may be times when therapy seekers experience identity power in ways therapist does not. Now you might be wondering, Umu, okay, great, power, 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 but how do I shift power in the room as a therapist? Here's a handy dandy list. Integrate a harm reduction approach, uplift other forms of care, invitation to research peer support. Really look at who else is out there who can be a part of the therapy seekers care network. Support self-diagnosis. I'm not saying to like listen to the whim of every diagnosis a therapy seeker might come up with, but like honor the fact that people are discovering for themselves different things, and sometimes there are systems of oppression that make it hard for diagnosis professionally to be a thing that can happen in a person's life. Have a flexible cancellation or rescheduling policy if possible. This is usually only possible if you run your own practice, but I used to, when I was working in someone else's like practice, I used to sneakily try to be like flexible anyways. Because you know, in some places, if a person late cancels 2 or 3 times or like doesn't show up a couple of times back to back, they get removed from your caseload forever. And so I tried to reduce that by like sometimes just like doing things that maybe would, you know what I mean? Um, create feedback loops, always asking, what's up? How's this feeling? Like, what's going on? What are the vibes? Apologizing and engaging in rupture and repair. I have messed up in sessions. I can't even tell you how many times, and have either had to apologize or engage in repair right then and there, or thought about it later and then came back to engage in repair. Um, you must do this. Like, you must. I don't like to say must in a lot of things, but this is one of the things. If you're not apologizing to clients, especially when like it's warranted, it is something to reflect on. Engage in embodied skillful self-disclosure. I was a person that really thought it was weird, the blank slate thing, that's being taught to a lot of people, because that just has this weird like zero power analysis on what's actually happening in the room. Like I literally am here with everything that's ever come before me, things that I know of and I know I don't know of. And I found it really important to like, especially because a lot of times people were coming to me because I'm Black. They were coming to me because I'm Muslim. They were coming to me because I'm queer. They were coming to me because of all of these things. And then I had this weird tension of I'm not supposed to share anything about my life. That's what they taught me in grad school. Meanwhile, there are ways to share, right? Just in a way that's not like strange and weird. And so I think that being embodied and engaging in this skillful self-disclosure looks like slowing things down, asking, am I sharing this because of me or because of them? How long ago did this thing that I want to share happen? Is this processed? Not healed, because I don't know what that means, but like, is this my first time talking about it out loud? Because I don't think that's appropriate to share with a client immediately. Um, does my body feel connected to this? Yes or no? If it doesn't, maybe I'll pause and wait until it feels more connected to it. Like really checking in and asking yourself these questions. And then once you ask yourself the questions, offering the thing and being like, hey, I want to share this story. You want to hear it? Yes or no? If they say yes, I share it. If they say no, I say thank you for telling me no. And then we move on. And that really helps to teach the therapy seeker that their no gets to be respected, even from a professional. More things, decenter expertise, be transparent about practices and policies, and so much more. So this is just like a glimpse into how you can do things. And then I'll share that in the supervision room, supervisors have power over therapists, but there also might be time when therapists experience identity powers in ways supervisors do not. Now, I'm going to talk about power, control, and coercion in supervision. There are some situations where supervisors might try to pressure or coerce you into making decisions. Specifically, not specific, specifically in situations like making a 911 call against your judgment, mandated reporting decisions when your assessment differs from your supervisor's, handling clients or situations in ways that contradict your ethical stance. A supervisor insists on making a 911 call for a client who expressed mild suicidal ideation despite the therapist feeling the client is not in imminent danger and needs a different intervention. Who here has maybe already been in a situation like this? And maybe you haven't. And I hope that you never do, but if you have, feel free to write me or definitely or whatever you want to write. Hey, some people already commenting saying that they have. Ooh, I haven't as part of graduate training, but I have as a suicide hotline counselor. I believe it. Hotline counselors are some of the like bravest people out there because they guess what? They're not getting trained a lot. They are working typically in super exploitative situations and lots of strange things are happening in the background. So supervisors may sometimes downplay your concerns as pre-licensed therapists, especially like in the way of saying things like, you don't have a lot of experience, right? Like you don't really know a lot. So in some of these cases, this clearly creates a power imbalance where your professional opinion, because guess what? You have one. You have a professional opinion, feels disregarded. And sometimes it is just completely disregarded. And they're like, do what I told you to do. If you don't mind writing, showing an emoji or writing in the chat, like how does this kind of situation make you feel? Like the potential for this to happen or the fact that it's already happened in your therapeutic career? What are some emotions or sensations that you notice coming up in your body? To know that this is literally a thing that has happened to people in this room or is going to happen to you soon. The ick, it makes me feel dehumanized. Yup, absolutely. What else is coming up for people? Surveilled. Yup, you're just as surveilled, almost just as surveilled as the therapy seekers you work with. I know when talking about this, like my heart starts to feel very like boom, 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 boom. My feet are feeling a little coldish, enraged, fearful. Yep. The real world, not a psychology textbook. Absolutely. This is just the real. And I'm not gonna lie to you, like this is something that you might in experience in a lot of your different internship sites, even in your first, second, or third workplace. It might be something that you have the energy to advocate around. It also might be something that you don't have the energy to advocate around. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Here are some of my key tips and strategies for navigating through some of this stuff. Document everything, right? If you're having a meeting with your supervisor and your supervisor's like, I think we should call 911, and you're like, I don't think we should call 911 because of A, B, and C. After you're done with that meeting, feel free to email that supervisor what you thought in an email if that's something that you feel comfortable with. One of the reasons why is because this helps to protect you in case something goes wrong, especially if you end up working with maybe a shady person, supervisor who maybe pushes blame onto you for a decision that's made in a case. Again, write down discussions, recommendations that you disagree with, and any feedback or pressure from supervisors. Next, we have consult with colleagues. Remember that in the therapy world, even if it feels like you're alone in your internship site, in your workplace, you're not alone. Reach out to trusted colleagues, to peers, or even other supervisors to validate your concerns if that's helpful. Ask colleagues if they've ever felt coerced by a supervisor into making a report or decision that they weren't comfortable with and how they handled it. Maybe you don't have to share everything that you're experiencing, but you can ask that question and kind of gauge how people navigate that. Know your rights. Familiarize yourself with the institutional policies, because that's one thing. State laws, that's another thing. And then ethical guidelines based off of whoever, you're bound to. So for me, it's AAMFT. For you, it might be something different, like APA. Next, we have rely on professional, ethical, or supervision guidelines. These may include de-escalation steps when issues arise. If you are working with a supervisor, it's really helpful if at the beginning of the relationship, you are aware of what guidelines and like ethical things are in place in that relationship. Sometimes supervisors even have contracts, right, that they'll draw up so you know the vibe, they know the vibe, everyone knows the vibe. If that doesn't exist, unfortunately, you'll have to, if you feel comfortable, be in this power under position and bring that conversation to the table. That might sound like, hey, supervisor person, I'd love to have a conversation about supervision guidelines and protocols and like all the nitty-gritty of these things. I'm just not really clear on them. And then lastly, it just says strategies. 'Cause there's so many strategies to learn, especially in the power world. Learn strategies for maintaining respect and professionalism while disagreeing. This might mean that you frame concerns like, I feel uncertain about this course of action, instead of saying, I think this is wrong, or saying things like, I understand the importance of this decision, but I have concerns about it. Can we explore options together? Because unfortunately, sometimes you might have to stroke the ego of your supervisor to make sure they don't start to like act in a way that looks like retaliation or something. Again, you'll get these slides so you can practice some of these sentences. Okay, you wrote for documenting, like, is it personally stored or is this connected to the client's records? My answer is it depends. Sometimes, depending on your workplace, there might be a separate section to like jot down these things. But what I'm saying in terms of like jotting down the disagreements, you might have this be in a separate record if you're like call it building a case. But I also, for good practice, like to just like send a summary email after I meet with someone. This is what we talked about. This is what you recommended. This is what I thought was the best course of action. These are the next steps you recommended for me. And so it's not something that they have to sign. It's just something that's in their mailbox. And again, depending on how toxic and scary the workplace is, the way that you do this might be a little different. Okay. So I'm going to go through these ethics and legal considerations real quick, and then we'll be near the end of the workshop. I really, really invite folks to know that it's important to spend some time reflecting on liability and risk, and to know that those of us that might be Black, Indigenous, people of color, queer, trans, disabled, undocumented, here on a visa, that conversations about risk tolerance is not theoretical. Liability and risk tolerance deeply shape how therapists show up, especially for those of us that are multiply marginalized, and it impacts professional behavior, decision making, what we say yes to, what we avoid, how we document, all of it. Risk tolerance is entangled with real consequences for people, right? And so there are things, especially when it comes to engaging in this non-carceral stuff, that makes it so that like some of us may choose to opt out depending on the client or the situation. When it comes to mandated reporting, it's important to know that it's not neutral, and to know that mandated reporting is connected to child abuse or neglect, elder abuse and neglect, suicidality, and threat of imminent harm. And this looks different depending on like the state that you're in. Regardless, it's important to know that if you are mandated reporting, that you slow down the process and make sure that you're not over reporting or engaging in like this practice of panicking and calling the state just because you're fearful. And to know that if you do need to make a call to the state, or you did make a call to the state, that there are strategies that you can engage in, like having a conversation with a therapy seeker so it's not a surprise to them what's happened, like clearly explaining reporting requirements to therapy seekers before and continuously so it's not, again, a surprise to them, consulting with colleagues and supervisors for support. Sometimes I've even invited therapy seekers to make the call themselves because it just looks better to the state for the therapy seeker to like be active in the situation that they're in. Um, Making call to the state is not a fun thing, but it's something that has happened in my therapeutic career, but it's happened um at a decrease over the years because of the way that I make sure to like involve community building into my caseload with people, because of the way that I ensure to like expand people's care networks and do like a collateral contact with the people's providers on my caseloads. It's important to know that when you call the state, that it's helpful to engage in aftercare and accountability focused conversations with therapy seekers. Don't pretend this did not happen. They will remember, and sometimes they'll disappear as a result. Instead, try to practice mandated supporting, centering, harm reductionist and anti-racist practices, and trying to decrease the like impact of these systems of surveillance and punishment on the families and the people that we're working with. I'm not going to read this ethics and legal considerations page, but it is here. I do want to make sure that folks know, though, that there is a fine line between ensuring safety and acting like a cop. Remember that it's important to stay ethically grounded while fulfilling your legal obligations. So let's do a scenario real quick where a therapy seeker expresses suicidal thoughts but doesn't want to work on a safety plan with you. How might you approach a situation like this? Therapy seeker expresses suicidal thoughts but doesn't want to work on a safety plan with you. How would you, as a therapist, approach this kind of situation? This is not easy, by the way. So if you're like, I don't know, great, put IDK in the chat. But I and invite you to practice like sitting with curiosity and even play and humor and what else? Groundedness as you think about your response. A therapy seeker expresses suicidal thoughts but doesn't want to work on a safety plan with you. How would you approach this situation? Have we assessed if this suicidal ideation is active or passive? Great question. That's a great place to start. What is the flavor of suicidality we're even talking about? What does active mean to this person? What does passive mean to this person? What does it mean to you as a clinician? Explore what the suicidal thoughts are looking like for them in that moment, what context has accelerated them, if relevant, and can that context be addressed? So good, so good. I think I'd have follow-up questions about the suicidal thoughts. What do they consist of? How frequently? Often? Safety plan might not even be the move. Agreed. Agreed. Spectacular. What I might do, I might ask myself questions about like, why doesn't this person want a safety plan? Like, what do they not like about it? Why do they, what are their past experiences with the safety plan? And these are questions I'm just asking myself. I'm not asking them particularly in the moment. Um, and then the therapy seeker, I might have questions or be curious about like, how long they've been experiencing this bout of suicidality, right? Like, how long has it felt like this? What does it feel like? Do you notice it in your body? If I'm doing IFS with the person, I might say, what parts of you are present right now? Like, is the suicidal part like take, like what does it want? What does it need? Does it like what does it want you to understand? It's not easy and something I'm actively trying to navigate at a big agency that relies on safety plans and CSSRSs. Something I try to ask is, how can we navigate these combos in a way that works for you, the client, and focus on the client's need in the moment? Literally fire, spectacular, fueguito. So good. Ultimately, I invite you all to spend some time exploring the following with peers or with a supervisor. What am I required to do by law in the state that I live in, where my license is at? What loopholes exist to minimize harm? 'Cause sometimes the law has lots of loopholes where it's like, yeah, maybe I'm supposed to call this state, but I'm going to wait a week and see if something can be done. What mental health laws exist in my state or country? Is what I'm being asked to do the law or is it workplace best practice? This is one thing that I've been able to have a lot of like conversations with some of my supervisors around. Like, is what you're telling me to do workplace best practice or is it the law? Can we talk about that? Because I'm a little confused and see what they say. What's my risk tolerance and what risks am I willing to take? Now, building your own toolkit might look like using my risk tolerance scale. It's a little bit of a work in progress. I'm going to share this document with you so that you have access to it. But basically, I have a little low risk where maybe there's minimal perceived risks. I'm following the rules. I love compliance. I'm just doing this because I'm scared of being seen as unprofessional. Low risk vibes. Moderate risk, slight deviation from the norm, but supported by ethics, consent, and supervision. I'm asking myself questions like, am I making this decision from care or from fear? Who taught me to be like this? High risk, there is significant departure from mainstream clinical norms, guided by ethics still, cultural values, or ancestral wisdom. Maybe it centers justice, integrity, and collective care. I'm asking myself, what legacy am I acting from? Who am I willing to be accountable to? So that's my little high risk area. I'm stretching in this section, right? And then transformative risk, risk that reimagines care entirely, possibly outside of institutional approval. This requires collective wisdom, deep consent, and support. I ask myself, am I moving with community? Can I withstand potential consequences for a greater healing vision? This scale is not linear or prescriptive. It's just a tool for reflection. Sometimes I'm moving through this scale from moment to moment, session to session, right? Depending on what's going on. But either way, I need to make sure I'm asking myself if I can stop acting like a cop in a cardigan and if I can trust that there is another way. And then these I'm not going to go through, but this is, there's a website down here that says mandated reporting is not neutral.com. Invitation to head to that website. They have like meetings, I think, every month, which is really cool. Here's an action plan that I've created, that I have workshops on, invitation to come and check those out. This website, don'tcallthepolice.com, is really cool, has things like blocked up state by state. Feel free to Google the rest of the things on this list. Here's another list. This one's the one that I curated. I love Walls Down Collective. They're really cool. Feel free to look up the rest of the things on this list. And then I have, yeah, these two slides about like how to be a radical mental health first aid informed therapist. Like how to know that, centering, not being a blank slate is really important. Decentering the protection of your license in decision making whenever possible. Being well-resourced on food banks, respite centers, non-carceral support options. We're almost at the end. This is a quote that I find really impactful. It reads, "It was the most radical and affirming healing I'd ever participated in. Years of therapy and counselors, years of white women telling me I'm resilient were nothing compared to having my cousins hold me as I screamed." And so remember, sometimes like the theories you've got, they're honestly garbage. They're nothing compared to sometimes people being held as they scream. Nothing that you say is sometimes good enough, right? And so it's really important to see how you can use your body and use the bodies of others to like hold each other during pain and grief and all that good stuff. And that's it. I'm gonna email you a feedback form so that you can offer feedback. If you want to write feedback in the chat now, feel free to. I'm down to be here for like 5 more minutes in case anybody has questions. I've answered basically all the questions that came into the chat already, but if there's things that like are lingering inside of you, feel free to ask them. If you're like, Umu, I've got no questions. Hey, we've got, thank you. You're so welcome. Thanks for being here. Mandated Reporters Against Mandated Reporting is also a really great informal space too that comes together once per month. Yes, look them up. We've got a sleigh. Thank you. Thank you. Please eat your noodles. Enjoy your noodles. We've got more thank yous. Spectacular. More thank yous. Great. You'll get this in an email, but I'm starting a therapist membership community in, I don't know, blank amount of time for pre-therapists and therapists that are divesting. If you're interested about in that, you can do reading on this little thingy and send me an email. Otherwise, my email is umu@jokawellness.com. Also, my website is www.connectwithumu.com. Also, my Instagram is the same name, and so is my Patreon. What else? I think that's it. I'm hosting something called Care Camp that's starting in about a week. It's going to be 12 plus weeks of care-focused stuff. Feel free to check that out. Here, let me put my website here so you can see stuff. And that's it. That's it. That's it. That's it. That's it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here.
I just want to say thank you, Omo, for coming and sharing so much wisdom with us. You've left us with so many questions, so much to think about. And I'm so excited for us to really dive into all the materials that you've shared with us and engage with all these questions. Thank you for also like naming all the other things that you're doing, and hopefully some of us will be able to join.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess that's pretty much it on our end, and definitely feel free to share these things with me via email if that works better and I can
I
send it.
will. I
Um,
will. I will.
yeah, and as always, no expectations to send it out immediately. Take your time with it, and we'll take our time as well to send it out to folks, but we'll definitely try to send it latest by, I guess, the end of April.
Amazing.
Yeah. But yeah, if folks don't have any other questions, feel free to hop off. You know how to stay connected with SAS. I'm just gonna drop this in the chat again, just in case it got lost. That's a space to check out for staying connected with us. But yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Wow. So cool.
I'm gonna stop recording now.
Okay.